Good day, everyone. As a part of the Asian Heritage Month special features, we have with us two guests who are here to speak about the importance of being a proud Asian Canadian and how the community is coming forward through significant activities like Asian Gold Ribbon Day campaign to show their support for the Asian Canadians and fight against anti-Asian racism. I welcome our first guest, Sheila Wong, co-founder and ambassador of Asian Gold Ribbon Campaign. She is also serving as the Senior Vice President with BBW International. And our second guest here is none other than the celebrity chef, Trevor Lui, founder of Highbell Group and Quell, and author of Double Happiness Cookbook. Thank you, both of you, for joining us today. And without further ado, let me start the questions. So this question goes for both of you. Tell us about your background and what significance does Asian Heritage Month hold in your respective lives?
So I guess I'll start first, Trevor, because ladies first. We have for me, I'm actually an immigrant. I moved to Canada as a child with my family, and I've always been had one foot in one culture and one foot in the other. And so I've had the fortunate experience of experiencing both cultures and being proud to be Asian, but equally as proud to be Canadian. And Asian Heritage Month has always been just a song and dance and a time to celebrate. But this year brought a different light. With the pandemic, we have experienced an incredible increase in anti-Asian racism, and the target of about 60% of the people targeted are women. 84% are East Asians, and there's only 17.7% of Canadians who identify as East Asians. So you can imagine the significance of that to my community. And so but that's, the heritage is we still need to be proud, but we wanted to bring to light some other issues.
Thanks, Sheila. For myself, before we talk even about the campaign and sort of the plight of what the Asians have gone through, one of the things that we talked about is the importance to acknowledge the increase of hate in general in North American society, if not global. So we have to acknowledge, obviously, that it's hard for us to rally around a cause just behind anti-Asian hate when we don't recognize what's going on with our Indigenous communities, our Black communities, and other communities that have seen this type of movement for generations. I myself I'm Canadian born. Have always recognized myself as a proud Chinese Canadian. My parents and my grandparents came from Hong Kong. What I think this year has done for me is it has helped open up wounds that reminded me that through my time in Canada as a proud Canadian, that even though I consider myself Canadian, many times others don't consider myself Canadian enough, or to basically earn the title of being Canadian simply by the way I look. And I'm sure Sheila can attest to that, and many Asian Canadians around the entire country can. And we have to remember that, we're both Chinese, but Asia is comprised of 49 countries. We are now also seeing an uptick of hate directed towards our South Asian friends with the pandemic as well. So it's sort of like, sadly, it's a type of progression that we don't want to see. So that's essentially, a good basis of starting a really good campaign like the Asian Gold Ribbon campaign.
That's great. So I would just go on to some of the as you both spoke about your descent, where you're from. So I would just want to know more about growing up. Did you have any interesting or memorable experience from your hometown in Asia that stay with you and you'd like to share with us?
Okay, so that would be me, because I actually I was born and lived in Hong Kong. I think this is a funny one, ironically, and this is long before we knew we were going to be emigrating to Canada. So when, when we were kids and our parents want to reward us, if we did well in school, we got good grades, we got to choose where we could have our special meal. And in Canada, I suppose some kids would choose McDonald's or their favorite fast food restaurant. We actually chose, we want Western food because we have Chinese food all the time. So in fact, we don't even call it Chinese food. We just called it food. So we wanted Western food, or in Cantonese it's called sai tan. And so that meant we went to a fancy restaurant where we had to get dressed up, and we paid exorbitant, my parents paid a lot of money for a very, very bad turkey meal. The turkey was overcooked, you know, gravy was, you know, gluey, and mashed potatoes were equally as gooey, but we loved it because it felt so exotic for us. And that was, you know, one of the fondest memories I have of living in Hong Kong. And even then, it was culturally diverse for, you know, back in the 60s. It was still, we had a lot of people from all over because it was a commercial center for the gateway to Asia.
That's true. I think Trevor had a lot to say there while you were describing the meal. I could see his expressions. So Trevor, do you have any experience? I know you grew up here, but do you have any experience while you visited? Anything like that?
I mean, I visited Hong Kong. Oddly enough, I haven't been back to Hong Kong in nearly 40 years, but I visited Hong Kong 3 times in the first 10 years of my life. So I have some tremendous memories of what Hong Kong meant to me as a kid, and me yearning and wanting to go back for more, particularly now. But even though, you know, I didn't grow up in the country of where my parents came from, there was, you know, the fact that we have a lot of Asian and Chinese culture, particularly in large city centers. You know, I spent a lot of my childhood in Chinatown and practicing all things Chinese growing up. All those things don't necessarily change, particularly as a kid that grew up in a restaurant setting, right? So, you know, we had a restaurant in North Toronto in Rexdale, and we didn't have the luxury. My grandparents, my grandfather who was the chef, didn't have the luxury of like having these food companies deliver all the food, because it was really hard to find, you know, ingredients that we needed to cook Chinese food. So we would actually go on a weekly trip in my grandfather's car, smoke filled as he's smoking, driving down the highway down to Chinatown, and we'd spend the day buying the groceries for the week in Chinatown, and then we'd grab a meal, and then we'd lug it all the way back to the restaurant. And to me, that almost seemed like a normal part of life. I thought everyone went through that, but that was the life of growing up a Chinese restaurant brat. So that has stuck with me. I'm actually working on with a local artist in Toronto to help me commission a piece of art to draw the bakery that no longer exists in Chinatown, but it was the bakery that we used to always go for after shopping. And Sheila, you probably know this. Do you remember Kim Moon? Kim Moon,
yes, loved it.
Yeah. So that place had a lot of memory for me, because we would always do our shopping, and I'd sit there with my grandma and my grandpa, have Hong Kong tea and a bolo bao and some charong fun, and then we'd go back. And so I was digging up old pictures, and I found an artist who's been drawing pictures of facades of, you know, landmark places in Chinatown, and he's going to commission a piece of Kim Moon for me.
Fabulous. I might want to take a look at that. It was my husband's, before, my husband is Caucasian, and before I met him, he was entrenched into the Chinese culture because he was working in IT. And so he learned a lot of his Chinese, or his colloquial Chinese, from his coworkers. And he often talked about Kim Moon and how he misses it now. It was his favorite place for the gai mei bao, which is the cocktail bun. And we really haven't found another place that make it just as well. If you know of any place, let me know, Trevor.
I will. And the one thing, you know, Kim Moon has that other restaurants don't have, if you remember, Sheila, it has the food elevator. So the food was cooked upstairs and then put in a little elevator, and then it came down, and the waiters would open the door and they take the food out. I mean, that was such a unique thing because no one else ever had that. And you're like, what is that little entrapment? So.
Well, I didn't know it came from upstairs. I thought it came from downstairs. So
maybe it was downstairs. I don't know. It came from somewhere.
Upstairs would be a premium real estate.
That's true. That's true.
That's interesting. Like hearing you both talk about something and reminiscing, it just makes me think that I've missed out on a lot. I just came to Toronto like 3 years ago, and uh, probably it would be really nice, interesting to know that there are a lot of these places which were there, which were part of culture and heritage. That's really a great thing that you're doing. You're trying to commission the art piece, Trevor. So as you spoke about your experiences, I would like to start with you for the next question, where I want to ask you, how do you and your family maintain try to maintain your cultural roots, like being in Toronto? Like what are the things that you do to stay close to your culture?
Well, I mean, my family is essentially the consummate North American example. My sister's husband is Portuguese, so my nephew and niece are half Chinese, half Portuguese. So they look like little kids from Macau. So for anyone knows, it's this little plot of land just an hour away from Hong Kong that was a colony. It was a Portuguese colony, but it's in China. My daughter, who is 16, is half West Indian and half Chinese. My current wife is South Asian. She's Indian. So, I think the way we celebrate, and I mean, this past year has been a little more difficult, and I really miss what we have not been able to congregate as much as, during holidays and earmarked times, you see the intricacies of our culture come out in our food. And that's what I've been really trying to do this last year, is to educate through food, because it's something that's the easiest to talk to people about, but also is very undervalued and misunderstood. And so, pre-pandemic, if you were to have Christmas with all our families, we would see like a bacalhau natas, which is a Portuguese fish dish, and then we'd see a curry rendang, and then we would see like a West Indian chow mein, and then we'd see, my mother-in-law's, I didn't know we had this, but Indian lasagna, and so and then my mom would bring some Chinese barbecue. So to me, it's that is the consummate level of celebrating Canadianism and also honoring our culture. And the one thing that we very little talk about, I talk about in my book a lot, is as immigrants, we have found a way to cook with things in our house, even though we grew up with Western food, because in Western culture, you start to integrate all these things you find in your pantry. And, when I married my wife, who's Indian, Punjabi, and we started eating at her parents' house, I was like, wow, your mom makes really good pizza, but it tastes like Indian pizza. And then the lasagna would be the same thing. It's because, and then I think about it, because my mom would do the same thing when she would cook pasta. She would add a little bit of Chinese spice to it, and Chinese spice here, and all kinds of stuff. So I think for me, food is the gateway of celebrating historical culture for all of us.
That's great.
And can I add to that?
Yeah, sure.
In my family, because we weren't in the restaurant business, we were an unusual Chinese immigrant family. My father was a professional photographer, and my mother was a dental, she was a dental technician, the people who made the bridges for your false teeth and that kind of thing. Anyway, so we were not necessarily surrounded by food like Trevor was. However, food was a very big part of our heritage, because my grandfather was a cook in San Francisco, and he was one of the early immigrants and my father's cousins were all working in restaurants in San Francisco. However, my mother was a terrible cook. I'm going to admit this. I didn't get my culinary skills from my mother, but she was, she tried. And so she would, because my brothers and I were immersed into the Canadian culture, she wanted us to maintain our language, our Chinese, our Cantonese. And she was afraid that we would lose that growing up. Even though both my parents spoke English fluently, it would have been easy for them to say, okay, we'll just, be comfortable and let the kids speak English. But my mother insisted that we kept our Cantonese up. And so what did she do? She used food to, I suppose to entice us, but I think it was a bribe. Because she was a terrible cook, she said, okay, if we're sitting at the table, we all speak Cantonese if we're eating Chinese food. If you start speaking English, I'm going to cook you Western food. And let me tell you, her Chinese food wasn't great, but her Western cooking was even worse. So, to this day, my brothers and I are both at least conversationally fluent, and we can function with
Wow.
our Chinese. So see how important food is?
Sheila, we had family in San Francisco, and it'd be interesting to know if there's any lineage between my grandfather's family, like his brothers and sisters actually were in San Francisco and very connected to the community. It would be really interesting to see if there were any historical ties there.
Well, what we did, and sadly, is all the older people in our family have passed away. So the most senior member of my family is my cousin, who's only in her 60s. But she actually has some history that she might have been aware of. And I also have a cousin in China, and we might be able to work on something. That might be a project, because when I went to San Francisco, and my cousin took me to the grave site where my grandfather was born, because I never did meet him. He passed away actually the same day that John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. And so I never got to meet him, but we were looking at the gravestones, and my father was with me, and he said, "Oh, look at those people. They're from our village. They're from the same, look at those people." And these are people he doesn't necessarily know. So what did happen with the early immigrants was people would, from an area, would all join together, and they would actually support each other to pay the head tax. And the village would gather the money together and lend it to these people to go overseas to work so that they can send money home. It became a community affair. So I bet you if you knew where your people were buried, we can do some digging around. It'll be fun.
It would.
That's actually very interesting to know, because as you rightly mentioned, Sheila, it always comes down to community and supporting people, and it's very much prevalent. I personally feel it's very much prevalent still in most of the Asian countries, right?
Yes.
The sense of community. So as we speak about that, so I would want to move to the Gold Ribbon Day campaign. So as the campaign approaches, how do you feel that it would impact the issue of the anti-Asian approach in Canada? So if you can weigh in on that, Sheila.
I sure will. And I'm going to elaborate on what Trevor so eloquently spoke about at the beginning, that if we could not, we wouldn't be here today if we could not stand on the shoulders of our Black lives and Indigenous people, because of the hate that they've experienced and the systemic racism that they've experienced for so many years. And I actually felt sad that we had to step up. And so the campaign itself is about bringing awareness to the fact that the hate has grown, and the hate has not grown just for us, but for, like Trevor said, all peoples in North America. And what we want to concentrate on is not so much the hate, which is giving us the reason to be here, but to concentrate on working together in unity, in solidarity, to stand together as one race, as the human race, in order to bring a better tomorrow, to eliminate the hate and to celebrate the diversity and the differences. And if it was up to me and Trevor, it would be all about the food. But the campaign has brought a lot of people to the surface, as you know, or you may not know, Vandana, but Trevor would agree with me that the East Asian culture, the Southeast Asian culture, and we're just not, it's just not in our DNA to be vocal about our unhappiness, or to rally, or to stand in protest. It's just not in our DNA. And so all of a sudden we're in a position where we couldn't stay silent anymore. At least that was my position. And I was a reluctant co-founder. No, you don't really want to call me a co-founder, I said, because, you know, I don't have time to protest or rally. But what I've loved about the campaign and what it has turned into is a place for young people, the youths of our heritage, to stand up and take notice and to say, hey, I don't have to be ashamed of who I am, where I come from. And I think what touched me the most is we have a youth summit that we're producing for Thursday for the actual Gold Ribbon Day, because there's another group, Act to End Racism, is putting on another session for just to have that conversation. And we thought we needed a platform for the young people to have a voice. So we also have brought in Minister Jagger, who is our diversity and youth minister, and a number of other VIPs who are Asians and who have elevated into very senior positions in government to come and listen to the youth. And one of the youths during our practice session, she said, I asked my mother what it meant to be proud, what it meant if she was proud to be Chinese. And she goes, and her mother, who is an immigrant, said, I don't think about it, I just am. She said, well, tell me what you think about China. So her mother commented on the fact, she said, oh, China, the streets are clean, the food is fabulous, everything's convenient, and the people are nice. And this young woman said, that's not what I think of China. I think of it's really dirty. I think the people are mean and the food is smelly. And she realized that she had a true dichotomy between how she viewed the place where her parents came from with what she thought was the case. And she said, I'm grateful for the Asian Gold Ribbon campaign because it has brought me to this place where I can be proud again. So for me, that in itself was worth all the trouble.
Well, that's actually very rightly put, like the way you started it. So I would want to ask you how, with all the initiatives that are coming up with the campaign, so how can us, or like me or any other audience who are going to watch this, how can we show support, or how can we participate? If you can elaborate on that.
Okay, so if this is going to be aired before May 20th, on May 20th, you can actually go to our website, which is asiangoldribbon.com. That's asiangoldribbon.com. And there's so many resources there. Under initiatives, there's a Gold Ribbon Day where you can click and decide what you want to do. You can support our campaign with the purchase of the masks, which has the gold ribbon insignia on it. And, we're going to be wearing a mask for months to come, I think, unfortunately. So purchase a mask and wear that mask. And when people stop to ask you, what's the ribbon for, you can talk to them about the anti-Asian racism movement that has started. We have a lot of educational resources on our website as well. The founder, Dr. Sheila Wong, is a psychologist, and she's a university professor, so it really helps to have her on board. And she's procured a lot of information, and I believe the Edmonton School Board and the Toronto District School Board, and there's also a school board down in the US that now has been mandated to teach Asian heritage and Asian history. And so they've tapped into our resources as well. And the other thing is, if you're an organization and you want to see this movement grow, because we're here to stay, we're gonna change it into maybe something else when hopefully the anti-Asian racism rates have lowered. But you can support us and the campaign and the work that we're doing. The other pillar is, besides the youth and the actual day, is to support mental health and through funding of paying for therapy, mental health issues that people from the Asian community who have experienced racism or victims of these crimes, we can support them through mental health treatment. And again, that's something else that's not typical of our culture, is that you just don't seek out professional help when it comes to your mental health. So we want to raise that awareness as well.
Well, that's actually great. And the thing that you said about mental health, awareness and well-being, that's very important. Also considering the fact that we have been in this period of staying inside the house and the lockdown period for a very long time and all these things. So I think that also comes in as a very important aspect, apart from serving the purpose that it is. So Trevor, I would want to pick your brains on something here. Like before I go to Sheila for the questions about futures of gold ribbon Asian Gold Ribbon campaign, I would want to ask you, do you have any plans, which is coming up with any new menu, or as you were speaking before to Sheila, that collaborating with her or something like that, do you have any interesting plans that you can spill the beans on, or are you even thinking about anything to collaborate with someone to make this day or a campaign even more colorful and more beautiful?
Well, being in the food side of the business, particularly during a pandemic, we have to continue to be creative because we don't know how long business is going to be halted for. I don't want to get into the statistics, but a large percentage of our restaurants have already closed permanently because of the pandemic, and we anticipate that number to probably double within the next 6 to 8 weeks. For myself, I am a little more removed from the restaurant side now. I started an agency in October with my sister called Quell, and our primary goal was to seek equitable work and social justice within the hospitality field for BIPOC individuals. So we represent BIPOC chefs, beverage experts, educators, etc., in the food and drink space, with a light on trying to create more equitable representation, as well as ensuring food has a better depiction of what our population looks like, right? That's why Quell and myself and my sister endorse the Asian Gold Ribbon campaign. Campaigns like this allow us to provide what we call a safe space for people. And I think that's the one thing that I've learned the most, as being a person that is in media and on television quite a bit. I've found a way to utilize my time in media so that I can help spread the word on education and awareness. And it's important to have allies. And like the producers of the programs that I'm part of have been shown great allyship by allowing me the opportunity to help co-produce and host segments about things like culture and history and the dichotomy and stigmatism against Asians. I think it's really important, the one thing that I've realized, that as much negativity and hate that I receive on direct message and in my inbox, I also get a lot of people that reach out and thank me for providing them a space that they can learn from, and also an outlet. As Sheila says, South Asians, Southeast Asians, Asians, Chinese, culturally, we do not have historically a large stance on being vocal. That's why we have the term model minority. That's why we have the term of put your head down and work hard and be quiet. I think that there's a lot of truth and a lot of positive things to look forward with today's generation, because they take the mantle of protest much more to heart. They don't have a problem with being vocal. And so we are now creating an area where they can learn and be vocal together. Asian Gold Ribbon Campaign is the exact same thing. Like Sheila says, there's tons of resources so that if you want to learn, and I think, if you talk about the creative formulas, let's learn together, right? So if I go back to your original question about food, yes, we've already done a few creative campaigns among Asian proprietors, and we will continue to do so. It's more about the food. It's less more about the actual food, but more about the story of food. And if you watch one of the segments I shot recently, we talk about that your average citizen has suffered mentally and financially through the pandemic. But then let's tack that on with what part of the world you're from or what part of the community you're from. So if you're lower income, that's even more stress on you. If you are Asian, Black Indigenous, perhaps, you add another layer. If you're in the hospitality industry, then you add another layer. So it layers pack on, right? And so it's really important for us as communities to continue to thrive and find ways for us to continue having fruitful discussions. And if that means around food, great. Because the one thing we talk about as well is we talk about how society views actually food in an inequitable way, right? And I can go on forever about that. But the goal here is utilizing food. I believe food and the dining room table is the last safe space that we have. So we need to utilize it to share our stories around everything that we eat and drink. It helps soften the mood as well when you're eating and drinking.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree to that. Yeah.
So Vandana, Trevor and I have started talking. Can I talk to them about the Mid-Autumn Festival? There's a likelihood that we're going to collaborate with Trevor, where through the Asia Gold Ribbon campaign, we're going to provide a cooking class during the Mid-Autumn Festival, which is going to be in September this year. It's a celebration of the largest full moon of the year. It's also known as the harvest moon. And so it's in China and in a lot of Asian cultures, it becomes a very big celebration, and it's about family and it's about food. And so we're going to stay on people's minds with this further activity of how we can celebrate Asian culture beyond Asian Gold Ribbon Day and beyond Asian Heritage Month. So stand by. We've got some exciting things coming up.
You know, Sheila made a really good point there that reminds me of one of the mantras we have at Quell, because one of our chefs, Bashir Mounier, had said this during Black History Month, and he's of African descent. You know, he had posted on Instagram and said that, I want to thank all my clients for calling me during Black History Month. I thank you for that. But I do want to remind you that on March 1st, April 1st, July 1st, I am still Black. So I would welcome your phone calls then. And so, yeah, you know, I have a lot of virtuals and a lot of sessions this month because it's Asian History Month, right? But I do want to remind people that I will be Asian the other 11 months as well. And so the encouragement here on providing education in safe spaces is for everyone to remind themselves that we are continuously learning, right? We have Indigenous Day, but Indigenous peoples are Indigenous for 365 days a year. So we have to live the life as a whole Canadian to appreciate what we are that composes this country. And I think we have to move away from if you ask Sheila, myself, and Dr. Gina Wong on whether or not we actually needed or wanted an Asian Heritage Month, I don't know about you, but I would say no, because I don't need a month to remind myself that I'm Asian, right? And why do we have these months, right? It's to help usher in the remembrance of what we have. But we need to get to a point where we can move away from these things, and this is a daily thing for us, right?
Yeah, that's actually a very important thing for us to remember, because it's about education. It's about recognizing everybody every day, you know. So that's all it is about. That was a very, very powerful message. So yes, thank you for that. And I know, Sheila, you just spoke about the future plans with Trevor. You're collaborating with that, but I would want to ask you, tell us about the future plan of Asian Gold Ribbon campaign. Like, what are you planning in the coming months or in a couple of years?
Well, if we're gaining so much support this year, the campaign, Vandana, if you can believe it, is only 7 weeks old. We started this thing 7 weeks ago, and we've gained so much momentum. How we're celebrating, you asked Trevor how he's going to celebrate that day, is that we've got the CN Tower, the Princess Gates at Exhibition Place, and hopefully the city sign to light up gold on Thursday, May 20th. But Niagara Falls is joining in as well at 10 p.m. for 15 minutes. They're going to light up the falls red and gold because it would be more interesting to have several colors. And so we're going to be out there on the street safely, of course, and we're going to take pictures of all of this and posting it. And this year it's about the visibility. It's about a visibility campaign on social media because of the pandemic. So anything people can do on social media to hashtag Asian Gold Ribbon would be fabulous. There are frames on your profile picture in Facebook that you can change to say, I stand in solidarity, or I am an Asian ally, or I am proud to be Asian. There's all these things that our graphic designer had produced. But the important thing is to get people to engage and have that conversation. You know, we have a do-it-yourself, make your own ribbon video on our website and also on YouTube. So if you just Google Asian Gold Ribbon DIY, you'll probably see my famous hands by now. And make your own ribbon. And so there's lots of things we can do, but I think the important thing is as we move forward beyond the day, beyond this month, and I said this before, that we need to all do what we can to stand together as one race.
That's great. And as we come to the end of the interview, I would ask both Trevor and Sheila, do you have any last words for us?
Sheila, how about I go and then I'll give you the last word.
Like my husband would do that too.
Listen, I think we've covered almost everything. What I do encourage people is I encourage people to continue reaching out. Number one, if you're from the community, I think it's important to stand in solidarity and support each other. If you're not from the community, I think it's really important that you also reach out to those that are in your network and check in. Whether you're Asian or not, I think it's important to check in on everyone, but don't shy away from hard discussions, and don't shy away from making difficult discussion or difficult decisions that you don't believe in. I think the most prominent thing that we've gotten out of this is how damaging silence is, right? On every side of the table. So you, number one, have to recognize that there are issues. Number two, you have to recognize that we have to have difficult discussions. But the last one is we also have to recognize that we have to always shine a light on the positive that comes out of everything. That's what I think we need to focus a lot more on. And I'll be one of the first to tell you that a lot of times I share a lot of negative stuff because I want to shine a light on what's going on. But we need to give equal ground on the amazing things that we have done, particularly as an Asian community. You know, we never really got into that too much in this discussion. Is, you know, Chinese date back to the 1700s in building this country. And a lot of people don't know about the contributions of what the Chinese and other Asian communities have done to help build this country to where it is today. So I think it's really important that we continue to educate and have conversations.
Yeah, and I'm gonna top that one as well by saying that the education is a key piece. And if you get a chance, Vandana, register for the Youth Summit that's coming up, because that's exactly what the young people are talking about. These are high school kids who are going to be talking about how they feel that there isn't representation for them in mainstream culture, that what they're being taught in school about their own heritage is so limiting, and that their parents would actually, or their teachers would actually look to the people who are visibly Asian in the classroom to ask them, oh, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And the curriculum is a little bit skinny. And so that's, you know, one of the calls to action. We hope that the education system and the government would take a look at. And it is about keeping the conversation going, Trevor. I couldn't say that enough. And so we hope that this time next year, we are going to be celebrating, of course, the end of the pandemic, or at least getting back to somewhat of a normal life, but to also celebrate Asian Gold Ribbon Day in a different way.
Yeah, well, I hope for that too. This day next year is, I'm really hopeful about that. So, so thank you so much for joining, us today, CAMSC today, because whatever insights you shared about the knowledge sharing that happened here, the key point was education, and definitely I got educated a lot, and I really had fun knowing about the cultures and the traditions. So